In this video, I'm going to show you how to put a really nice touch on your NPCs to make it seem like they're really kind of alive and doing things in the world. It's a very easy trick to do, but it really makes the NPCs feel like they're real characters and not like they're these cardboard cutouts that are just standing there like a statue. So in this sample project here, I've created one room called the computer lab. There's an Apple II in the computer lab and an NPC for Mr. Wright in the computer lab. I'm Mr. Wright, of course. And then actually for the initial description of Mr. Wright, maybe I'll say like Mr. Wright is here tending to his numerous machines. There we go. That's a great description of Mr. Wright, and because that's pretty much what I do. All right. So now let's save this and just run it and see what it looks like. So now it says this is a computer lab crowded with both modern and vintage. Let's fix that. With both modern and vintage machines. How about that? Vintage computers. All right. That sounds better. Let's run it. This is a computer lab crowded with both modern and vintage computers. Mr. Wright is here tending to his numerous machines, right? And examine Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright is old, gray, and distracted. All right, yeah, that's pretty much me. All right. Now, the thing is, like, if we wait here, we could wait here forever. We could do a million things in this room, and it's like Mr. Wright is just standing there. And it would be cool if every now and then it said, like, hey, Mr. Wright does something, or he went, takes a pencil out of his desk and sharpens it or something. Or a mechanic, if you have a mechanic, the mechanic takes a wrench out of his toolbox, tightens something, then smokes a cigarette or something. Yeah, avoid tobacco and alcohol in your games, just, But you want to have your NPCs, like, do things. The plumber pulls up his pants or whatever, right? Like, video's going south fast. But Harry Potter maybe reads through his spell books, or he takes his wand out of his pocket, fiddles with it, and then puts it away, right? So these are just little messages that we're going to print out that make it seem like the characters are actually doing something. And it's very easy to do this. So let's go to the events. And remember, events are functions. They're a type of function that run every turn. So I'm going to make an event called like Mr. Wright, actions or something like that, and click create. And in the snippets here, I've added a snippet for under NPCs, print random NPC actions. Maybe I should change that to messages. But what it's going to do is it's going to kind of randomly print things out. So let's go add this, and we'll see what it does. Which object is the NPC? Mr. Wright. Okay. So what it has done is added a variable for us called number over in our variable section. If I go to events, what this if statement says is that if Mr. Wright's location is equal to the player's location, so when you're reading this code, the dot is the apostrophe S. Mr. Wright's location is equal to the player's location. That means the player and Mr. Wright are in the same room. Then I'm going to set number, my variable number, to a random number between 0 and 5. And it will come back as 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'm rolling like a 5-sided die here. And I'm storing the result of that in this variable called number. So generate me a random number between 0 and 5 and store it in this variable called number. And then what I'm going to do is check what the result of that was. So I'm going to roll a die, basically, and then look at it and say, what number came up? So I'm saying if the number was 0, then it's going to print Mr. Wright drinks a Diet Coke, then throws the empty can in his desk. So I should probably put a scenery object with it as a desk filled with empty Coke cans or something. If the number came up 1, it's going to print Mr. Wright walks over to an Apple II and checks that it still boots. If it comes up as a 3, it says Mr. Wright checks that no students are sleeping, then goes back to bug fixing. So if it's a 0, 1, or 2, it's going to print out one of these messages correspondingly. And what if it's 3 or 4? Well, then it's not going to do anything. And that's okay, because we don't want like the console to be spammed with these messages. We just want it to kind of periodically or intermittently print out one of these messages. So if you want them to happen less frequently, you can change this 5 to a 10. Now it rolls a 10-sided die, and if it comes up 0, 1, or 2, then it's going to do these things. So obviously, if the more sides there are on your die, the bigger that number is, the less likelihood of these things running. Now, also notice these are if statements. So if this is true, do this. This is, and then otherwise, if numbers 1 do this. Now, do we really need the else? Well, technically not, but this is it'll actually run a little bit faster. So when you have else ifs chained together like this, this is, we are only going to do at most one of these possibilities. If these are just all if statements, like not connected, like this, if they were all like this for some reason, I'm angling my code. If they were like this, then there's a possibility we could do all 3 of these, execute all 3 of these. Now that we can't really, because numbers either going to be, it can't be 0 and 1 and 2, but these if statements are now totally unrelated to each other. And there's, if depending on what kind of code you're running, there's a chance that you could execute all of the bodies of those if statements. So if you want to have, test a case and then execute one of several possibilities, that's when you use else. That's when you chain, you have an if statement followed by else if, else if, else if. And if you wanted some sort of, backstop case that handled everything else, that would just be a regular else clause like that. So if it wasn't this, and it wasn't this, and it wasn't this, otherwise you're finally going to do the stuff in there. But we don't care. We don't want it to do anything. So let's run it and see what it does. So again, let's change this to be a 5, just so it's a little more obvious what it does. And let's run this. Okay, you didn't see that. I misspelled else when I went back to type in my code. So now I have high hopes for this. All right, there we go. So it says, Mr. Wright is standing here tending to his numerous machines. Now that's what happens when I type wait. It says time passes, Mr. Wright checks that no students are sleeping, then goes back to bug fixing. And if I type vars, V-A-R-S, it's a debugging command. Notice that number came up as a 2 last time. So number came up as a 2, so it printed out this message. Now if I type wait, Mr. Wright drinks a Diet Coke, then throws the empty can at his desk. And let me check the variables again. And you can see that number came up as 0. Where every time the user does something, we are generating a random number, and then we're just checking it to see if it's one of those things. And we can print out all sorts of cool little actions to make it kind of seem like our NPCs are kind of alive and doing things in our world. Like I should have something in here like, Mr. Wright ignores every computer not, made after 1989 or something like that. But this is a really nice touch. It's really easy to do. It makes it feel like your NPCs are, dynamic and doing things, and not just these statues there. So if you have NPCs in your game, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do something like this, just to give your game just that little bit more polish.